Ian, you calculated a base case and an upside case,
Yep.
and I'm referring to 2024 now.
Yep.
And just want to make sure I get all the numbers right, and that the upside case was based on 18 passenger and 12 cargo. So even if it's not 2024, say a little bit after, they actually are able to hit that because all the financing pieces and everything else fall into place.
Yeah.
You came up with a fair value on the stock. It was a little over 5 US and a little under 7 Canadian. So can you give us some idea of, based on all of those numbers, the fair value, the timing of that?
Yeah.
That I know it's difficult,
Yeah.
but if people are looking at it saying, well, that's about 6 times the current stock price.
Yeah.
Is that 1 year, 2 years? It's a little crystal ball rubbing now. But if we just use the upside case numbers,
Yeah.
you thinking a couple of years from now or what?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of things. One is obviously they have to execute on deliveries and revenues. And I think challenge two is, as I said, revenues and costs. It's not going to be 11 aircraft. It's hard to get to their $140 million revenue number. I get beyond that, I get $148 billion for 2023 on the base case. And then the costs, I'm probably a little light on costs, but I have negative EBITDA in 2023 versus their projection, negative EBITDA for 2023 versus their projection for positive EBITDA. So there's a lot of uncertainty. That's kind of what I'm getting at. What we think is it's going to be better. It's going to be better than their base case, and hopefully the market's going to be a lot better, because there's a lot of uncertainty macro-wise in the market, which is having a huge effect on everything, just the market in general. So we get into end of 2023, early 2024, we have a better market, we have more visibility on revenue, we have better visibility on costs, like run rate type costs. And then when we get into 2024, we're still thinking EV to EBITDA targets that are 1 year forward. So then we're thinking 2025. So, there's a lot that's going to change, and I think the big changes are going to come mostly in Q3 of this year, because we're going to see, Q2 is going to be interesting, but Q2 goes to the end of June.
And
Q3
we're only a month
is
away.
August,
Yeah.
July and August, and I think those are going to be, they're traditionally very strong months. They look like they'll be strong months. So I guess I haven't given you an answer yet, but we're expecting to see an upward trajectory. If you get to the 18 and 12, or even if you get partway there, that number seems like it's reasonable, like $5 US seems like it's reasonable kind of late 2024. But then you're measuring everything based on 2025. You're going to have higher revenues, hopefully a higher multiple. So I'm using a 5.5 times EV to EBITDA multiple based on the comps. What we saw in COVID is that spiked up to 9.6 times, which doesn't make sense. It was too high. Now we're at basically 10-year lows. I think a normal multiple would be 6.5 times. If I took that same 6.5 time multiple to my 2024 estimates for the base case, my numbers would be 35% higher. For my upside case, they'd be 25% higher. So many multiples.
There's a lot of variables.
Yes.
On that point about valuations, we look at the sector, and in your report, you got into peer group comparisons.
Yeah.
And I'm only getting into this to give folks some idea of what's happened with the sector.
Right.
Just two of the companies, and I think there were half a dozen or so, was Sun Country Airlines,
Yep.
which is similar in nature but bigger
Yep.
to global,
They all are.
and then Cargo Jet.
Yeah.
Sun Country, a couple of years ago, was over 43 US.
Yeah.
Now it's $18, barely holding $18 a
Right.
share.
Right.
Cargo Jet in the same time frame was over $250 per share Canadian,
Yeah.
and it's treading water, literally over $100 right now. So those very large companies have really taken a hit as well.
Yeah.
They're down far more than 50%.
Sure.
I don't think that a lot of people tend to look at what's going on in the sector. But because Global X is, we'll call it an emerging charter and cargo operation, do you think the valuations impact Global X as much as they would, say, larger entities?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I mean, the market has an effect on everything. And the market is not in good shape for all sorts of different reasons, whether it's Silicon Valley Bank or interest rates or the next rate hike, consumer confidence. There's all sorts of reasons. I can go on and on and on about, war in Ukraine, Russia issue, all sorts of stuff. A lot of those things weren't a factor in 2021. When you're talking about Sun Country at $250, and I think it basically only
Cargo jet was $250.
Oh, okay.
Sun Country was $43.
Sorry, my mistake. Anyway, those were extreme valuations in a market that was rewarding things in strange ways. In the report, you saw that the average EV to EBITDA multiple was 6.5 times over the last 10 years. So it spiked up, like I said, 9.6 times during COVID times. During the height of COVID times, and e-commerce was booming, cargo jet was also booming. So those prices were unrealistic for the long term. But I'd say prices are unrealistically low now for the long term as well. So we're going to end up at something that looks like, in my opinion, 6.5 times multiple. So there's upside to both those stocks. I think there's more upside to Global X because of the nature of their business and because it hasn't really caught on yet. You look at, and all these companies that started at some point as a much smaller entity, but we're trying to compare a very small startup to a much larger industry player in all of our comps. It's as good as we can do to generate those comps, but they're still kind of out of the league of where Global X is.
But every large company started as a small company.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think people maybe forget that.
Yeah.
And obviously this is going to be your personal opinion.
Yeah.
Do you think there's an end game for Global X to get to a certain size, whatever is the right size, and then a larger company comes in and takes them out? Or do you think it's a more likely case of where they just keep growing and growing and growing and become literally a global brand? Because Ed Weigel, the CEO, has talked about expansion to South America and Europe. Sure. And all sorts of things. Yeah. Do you have any feeling about that?
That's a management question. Anybody who invests shouldn't, in my opinion anyway, shouldn't be investing for some kind of takeout or sale process. It's a bad strategy. So you have to look at the fundamentals of the company and say, do I like the fundamentals? Is it something that I think is going to improve? Is it going to get better in the future? Is it going to get worse in the future? I just think the fundamentals say that this company's more likely to go up than down, of course. And if you get a transaction along the way, that's great. I think that really depends on their cargo business, though. So that's the sex appeal in the company. And the company, both Ed and Ryan have said it on multiple different occasions. The free cash flow generating capacity of the cargo business is exceptional. So if they do find, and we've seen 410GX, which is their first cargo plane. From a utilization perspective, it's been great. It's a single contract. If they can get more of those types of contracts on new cargo planes, we're going to see the effect of the revenues in Q2 and then into Q3 and hopefully more planes. So if the cargo business looks as good as everybody thinks on the Global X front, I think there's some incentive to just take it out. But I wouldn't be investing thinking that it's going to be a takeout candidate. And I trust management to manage their business appropriately. It's up to the shareholders, they'll work in the best interest of the shareholders. And I know that management and insider own 41% of the stock. So if they get a blowout price and it seems like that's the right thing to do, I trust them to do the right thing. But like I said, it's the fundamentals that I'm more concerned about.
We're just about getting ready to wrap, but any closing comments?
No, I mean, the stock, given the market, given, you know, the delays to aircraft and stuff, the stock is behaving really just fine. You know, it's a story about the future for sure. And I think there's a very strong indication that 2023 is going to be a turnaround year for them. And the stock's way up from 2022 to 2023. We saw it spike up, but it didn't hold those levels in the high 170s, 180s. But I think with some good news, like I said before, on the financing and on aircraft delivery, I think 2023 is going to be a good year for the company. And hopefully, people will start to think along the same lines. Let's measure this in terms of revenue growth, in terms of EV to EBITDA. Let's not focus 100% on the planes. The planes have been very frustrating, there's no question, but just as frustrating, if probably more so to management than it is to shareholders. So I'm hoping that that plane delivery schedule improves and we start to get a little bit more credit for all the other things that they've done, because I think they've done a fantastic job.
Thank you.
No problem. Cheers.
Cheers.